Crossover special with Locked On Detroit Red Wings. How will several Rangers turned Red Wings fare in Detroit? And what do the guys from Locked On Red Wings think about the proposed trade between the Rangers and the Red Wings that involved Jacob Trouba? All this and more on today's episode.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1118 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And so, yes, we are going to go ahead and play our conversation with Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley of Locked On Detroit Red Wings. Always a great time talking some hockey with those guys. They do an awesome job with their show. Definitely check it out if you get a minute. But yeah, basically going to be talking about a couple of Rangers that are, or former Rangers that are now on the Detroit Red Wings. Also going to be talking a little bit about the Jacob Trouba trade that never was. It looked like it might come to fruition. It never did, but definitely interested to get their perspectives on that. And just a whole bunch of other NHL topics that we get into. So, yep, without any further ado, here is our conversation with Brian and Scotty of Locked On Detroit Red Wings.
Today on Locked On Red Wings, what to expect from Erik Gustafsson and what the heck happened to the Jacob Trouba trade. We're going to break that all down with John Chick of the Locked On New York Rangers.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Today, we are pleased to be joined by John Chick of Locked On New York Rangers. This is something that, John, you and I were DMing back and forth about for probably about a month now. Ever since the news of Jacob Trouba potentially coming to Detroit broke, we were like, oh, when that trade happens, let's do a crossover. Well, that doesn't seem like it's happening now, but we can still talk about that, as well as the fact that Erik Gustafsson is now a Detroit Red Wing. He came from the Rangers, and, you know, how every single player on this team is post-deadline 2023 New York Ranger material as well, with Patrick Kane, Tarasenko the year prior with Andrew Kopp. There's a lot of Rangers, so there's a lot of players we can talk about. Also, of course, 2020 draft, you got Lafreniere, you got Raymond. So this is going to be a really fun conversation to have here in the offseason. And first and foremost, how are you doing? And thanks for coming on with us.
I'm doing great, man, and thanks for having me. It's always fun, teaming up with you guys for these fun-filled crossover editions here. And yeah, man, just kind of going through the offseason, talking about the Ranger draft picks and everything they did and did not do in free agency. And, of course, spent a considerable amount of time on the whole Jacob Trouba situation. But as you said, we'll get to that in due time today.
I'm sure that's been a blast for you to just constantly have to talk about with your fan base time and time again. Kind of like for us, talking about Seider and Raymond extensions constantly. It's just like that one thing that is going to make or break the offseason, and it's not done yet, so you got to just constantly be churning out content regarding it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's always there. It's one of those things that's kind of lingering. And as we were talking about, before we even hit record here, the thing with Jacob Trouba, I don't see it happening now. I mean, I guess never say never, but if they were going to move him, the time to do it would have been before free agency even started. And, you can then put that cap space towards signing this guy, trading for that guy, doing whatever you want to do. But at this point, all the big free agents are gone. So not a whole lot of sense in making it happen now.
Right. Yeah. What's the point at this point? Right? Like literally, like what is the point of doing it? As you are, August is right around the corner. August is a week away, a little over a week. Like I don't think, and that's obviously something that's been a high point of conversation for both of our fan bases. But I'm with you. I really don't think there was a solid 2-3 days where I was like, okay, it's just a matter of when. Like it's gonna happen. And now I guess it still makes sense from the Wings perspective. If they can upgrade their second pair, then they should probably consider that. But I don't know. I don't understand the incentive behind the Rangers doing it at the end of July or even into August.
Yeah, I don't really either. And honestly, their whole approach to the whole thing was very strange. And, I've talked about on my show that at this time, even now, it feels like we're on chapter 3 of a 10-chapter book. It feels like there's still more questions than answers surrounding the whole thing. Now, obviously, Trouba's full no-move clause went to a 15-team no-move clause this offseason. But the weird thing to me is that, the Rangers, before Trouba's 15-team list was due, they, I guess, leaked the story that they were looking to finalize that deal with the Red Wings of sending Trouba there. And my question there at the time and still now is, okay, if you're going to do that, why would you make that known? Why would you let Jacob Trouba know about that? Because wouldn't it make more sense to just wait for him to do his no trade list and then, oh, hey, Detroit's not here, we can just do the trade? And if Detroit is on the list, then maybe you try to talk him, into waiving the no move clause anyway. But once they did that, it's like, well, if I'm Jacob Trouba and I don't want to be traded, I know one of the teams that I'm going to put on that list, and it's going to be the Detroit Red Wings. And those lists are never made public, but I would be shocked if Detroit wasn't one of those teams that's on the list at this point.
Yeah, the whole thing is crazy, and I got a little bit ahead of myself. I do want to talk Jacob Trouba first and foremost, but I have to say that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel today, FanDuel.com today to get started. Got a little ahead of myself. That's my fault. But John, talking about the Jacob Trouba thing, right? It just, the whole situation is bizarre. And I want to back up a little bit because, Jacob Trouba is, and I'm sure kind of I don't want to say controversial figure. That's kind of a strong word to use, but people always associate him with a dirty player because he's a tall guy who hits with his elbows flared out at times. Wasn't Jacob Trouba also the guy who slashed the guy in the head earlier in the season with his stick?
Trent Frederick, yeah, he that one I'll actually defend Trouba, and let me say Trouba certainly, to your point, Brian, he toes the line between what's right, clean and what's not. There's times where people go after him, and I think that was not a good hit, and maybe it is suspension worthy. There's other times where people have issues. That specific one with Frederick, if you watch the replay, it's during a stoppage. It looks like he's off balance. He's falling backwards. Now, he absolutely meant to slash Frederick, but he's kind of falling backwards, and I think that causes his stick to go a little higher than he wanted, and that's where, hits him in the side of the head. So that one, I'll defend him a little bit. I can buy it there. There's been some other things over the years, though, where I have not defended it, and I said that's not a good hit, and he probably should face some discipline for it.
And so that leads me to my question here is, why were the Rangers looking to trade Jacob Trouba, who is a strong right side D-man, who is your captain, and as much as we joke about how the Mark Messier Award is given out, is the Mark Messier Leadership Award winner this past year. What has changed since when he came over from Winnipeg until now, where the Rangers are looking at him and going, we got to move this guy?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. I think first and foremost, you have to start with the $8 million cap hit. There's a lot of Ranger fans that really like Jacob Trouba. I've seen some Ranger fans that say that he's their favorite player. And hey, I respect everyone's opinion. There's a lot of people that really appreciate the things he does, blocking all these shots, playing old school hockey, establishing a physical presence for the Rangers. But there's nobody that can look at what he did this season, and especially in the playoffs, and look me in the eyes and tell me that dude is worth $8 million a year. There's just no way. I'm just not buying it. And people talk about the physicality and the grit and the toughness. That shouldn't cost you $8 million a year. There's a lot of tough physical guys in the league that are making significantly less than that. On top of that, I touched on it just a second ago there, but the postseason performance, it was just unacceptable. Just penalty after penalty after penalty, all kinds of turnovers. The Game 4 overtime winner, the Panthers were on the power play in the Eastern Conference Final, but Trouba completely took himself out of the play. There was a goal that they gave up in Game 6 that was completely on him as well. Again, just taking himself out of the play for no real reason. And I think one other thing that probably doesn't get talked about as much as it should, I mean, Ranger fans, are aware of this, but, general hockey fans might not be as aware. The emergence of Braden Schneider. Braden Schneider has really stepped up for the Rangers. Good young player. Just recently, he was an RFA, just recently signed a bridge deal. And, his emergence makes Trouba all the more expendable because you look at the right side, Adam Fox is going to be your top pair D-man on the right side. And then Schneider more than capable. And they made that switch during the season and during the playoffs of handling the second pairing. So now you've got Jacob Trouba, $8 million third pair defensemen. I mean, how many third pair defensemen are making that much? A lot of them are in the 6 figures or the low 7 figures. So I really think it's a combination of things. And I think for all those reasons, they were comfortable, trying to move on from him, even though it did not ultimately happen.
If they were at some point to move on from him, this is like a super general question. So if you don't have like an exact number, that's fine. But I have a hard time believing anyone is taking his contract on fully. Like, how much money are you planning on eating? Like, exactly. Like, I guess I'm just fascinated with the whole situation, obviously, because of the points that like Brian laid out. Like, he clearly has like some value in the locker room, and people look up to him and whatnot. But how I guess motivated are the Rangers to move him? Like, clearly not motivated enough to get rid of him this summer. But like, how motivated are they to get rid of him? How, like, to what extremes will they go? Maybe looking forward to offload that money, just because, again, like, clearly that would do something to the locker room. I'm not sure if that's necessarily a bad thing, or if it's going to be like super detrimental to lose, as you put it, a third pair defenseman probably. But I would imagine that they're going to have to eat a substantial amount of that money to be able to offload him.
Yeah, I would think there probably would be some salary retention on the part of the Rangers. I would think that probably, the trade that was floated, the idea of, Trouba going to Detroit, the framework seemed to be that the Rangers would retain $2.5 million of the $8 million salary. And I will say right now, whether it's with Detroit or anybody else, if that's the conditions, and it's one of those things where it basically is just a glorified salary dump and the Rangers just have to retain $2.5 million, I would drive him to the airport myself. I mean, I'm not trying to sound mean here, but Trouba's play just was not good enough. It was not befitting of an $8 million a year defenseman. And, before free agency started, I especially would have done that, because then you can go out and maybe bring in this guy, bring in that guy. Now, it is worth pointing out that, next season, the Rangers have a decent amount of players that need to get paid. You've got Igor as a UFA, Keandre Miller, Alexis Lafreniere, both RFAs, even Capo Caco. I mean, if he breaks out a little bit this year, he's an RFA too. There's no way Jacob Trouba can be on this roster at this time next year. There's just no way you can hang on to Jacob Trouba and lose one of those players that I just mentioned, specifically, Igor and Lafreniere, and even Miller to a lesser extent. So yeah, whenever it does happen, whether they waive him, somebody claims him, or there's some kind of trade here or there, and there's some salary retention, I do think the Rangers will have to, eat some of the money, have some salary retention. But I do think at a certain point, it's going to be inevitable. I just don't see any way, even if the salary cap increases next offseason, that the Rangers can afford to keep him on the roster when they need that money for other more important things.
Awesome. Let's go to a quick break here, and when we return, I want to switch and turn our eyes to Erik Gustafsson, newly anointed Detroit Red Wing. The ink isn't even dry on the contract yet. Let's talk about him next and the role that he played with the Rangers and what we can expect from him on this crossover episode of Locked On Red Wings and Locked On New York Rangers. I love sports, and I love it so much I never want them to stop. Baseball's still ongoing, but everything else right now is kind of in a lull. But you can go to FanDuel, and they let you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you got to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel.com, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings, Locked On New York Rangers crossover episode. I want to talk about Erik Gustafsson now, John. Here in Detroit, we kind of have an idea in our head that like he's kind of a Gostisbehere light. He's meant to replace Shane Gostisbehere as a power play merchant. But I want to ask you, like, on the New York Rangers, how was he utilized and what can we expect of him?
Yeah, so Gustafsson, when he was with the Rangers, and it's only 1 year, but he was very strictly the number 6 defenseman, was always out there on the third pairing. Began the season with Braden Schneider, and then, of course, we talked about Trouba a minute ago. Trouba and Schneider flip-flopped, so there was a time he was out there with Jacob Trouba as well. And I never really heard him compared to Gostisbehere before, but I do think that analogy definitely works. They're both known as offensive defensemen and guys that can help on the power play. And I feel like I personally liked Erik Gustafsson more than most Ranger fans did, he got off to a really strong start this year. And man, when Adam Fox got injured and missed, I think it was about a month, give or take, he stepped up in a major way. All of a sudden, he's quarterbacking the top power play unit. They didn't miss a beat. He was also seeing more ice time, obviously, and playing a little bit with Lindgren on the top pairing for the time being, if I'm remembering that correctly. Did a nice job there as well. As the season went on, though, you do start to see why he's been on so many teams in such a short amount of time. I mean, if you look at, he's a great player for, immaculate grid, because it feels like he's played for just about every player in every team in the NHL. But yeah, second half of the season, toward the end, maybe even in the playoffs a little bit, you do see him start to struggle a little bit defensively. There's times where, him, whether he's out there with Schneider or Trouba, they would get pinned in their own zone a little bit. But, for the most part, I liked what the Rangers got from Erik Gustafsson. People got on him a lot, and I'm thinking, like, dude, this is your number 6 defenseman making like $850K a year. Like, you're not expecting him to be a Norris Trophy candidate, So overall, I think he did good. I know a lot of Ranger fans really like Zach Jones, and I do too. And there were some people that wanted to see him sub into the lineup in place of Gustafsson. But yeah, man, I mean, you're getting somebody that can quarterback a power play and really know what he's doing there. And I think if you limit him to being on the third pair and he gets, the appropriate amount of ice time per night, I think he'll do well there. He's not somebody that's going to be on the ice at the end of a game. If you're up by a goal, you've got other defensemen you'll go to before him. If there's just like a minute or two left, you're trying to protect a 1-goal lead, he's not going to be out there. But overall, for somebody that it looks like for you guys would probably be on the third pair. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I think he'll do just fine in that role.
Yeah, no, he's definitely third pair. And then we actually, our episode yesterday was breaking down the special teams, and we both have him on power play 2 with Sider, obviously, on power play 1. I think the biggest question, and we don't have to spend too much more time on Gustafsson, but the biggest question when they acquired him was because everybody is comparing him to Ghost. Ghost was 5th or 6th on our entire team in points. Like, he was really high up there, quarterbacking a lot of the offense, but Ghost was one of the worst defensive defensemen I've ever seen. And he was like, his deployment was strictly offensive zone and power play, because they literally could not afford to have him on the ice when the puck was in the Red Wings zone. So I think the question that people have when they brought him in was like, okay, this guy's clearly replacing that role to an extent, right? He's clearly going to be a quarterback type of player and drive offense and be on a power play and whatnot. But is he like that horrible defensively too? Or is it at least, and I'm not asking you to compare him exactly to like Gustafsson specifically, but just in general, like, is it another like, okay, we got an offensive defenseman, but he's a complete liability? Or is there at least, as you put it, like, was able to step up and provide something on the defensive side of the puck as well?
Yeah, could he hold his own?
I think he at least holds his own defensively. I mean, he's certainly not elite. And, as I touched on a second ago, known more as an offensive defenseman. And when you spend an entire season with him, you do see why. But I never saw him as like this massive liability for the Rangers. I think he did okay. And he'll give you enough there. I mean, the way you're describing Gustafsson, he's clearly not at that bottom of a level. And over the years, I've seen some bad Ranger defensemen. I don't think Gustafsson was a bad Ranger defenseman. There were guys out there that you had to hold your breath every time they were on the ice. It felt like they were a complete liability. Patrick Nemeth a few years ago definitely comes to mind. They had Jack
Red Wings legend.
Yeah. I was going to say a lot of those players you're thinking of, I think, are Red Wings too.
Jared Tenorti was here for a little while. Like, just really random players. It's like, man, like I hold my breath every time they're out there. I never got to that point with Gustafsson. So, definitely better in the offensive end of the game, but I don't think a tremendous liability defensively either.
Well, then that leads me to, my next question too regarding the New York Rangers. Now with the departures that they've made and who they've brought in, what is the expectation for this year? And if the expectation is what I think it is, how long do the Rangers have to meet that expectation?
Yeah, so obviously, you come off a season where you're in the Eastern Conference Final for the second time in 3 years, and you win the President's Trophy, and look, they had a shot. There's Ranger fans that are really dramatic and act like, they weren't even in the series. They were in overtime in Game 4 with the Panthers. If they score that goal, they are up 3-1 in the Eastern Conference Final, and at that point, who knows what happens? So, fine line between winning and losing in the playoffs. I really do think that's true, and I always feel like the number one reason a team doesn't win the Cup is because it's really freaking hard to do, and there's 31 other teams in the league. But with all that said, yeah, the window, I mean, I feel like they're going to have, with this core group of players, probably at least 2 more cracks at it, 2 more seasons. That's how long Artemi Panarin is signed for. And then all the other key pieces, whether it's Adam Fox or Kreider, Mika Zibanejad, Trocheck, all these guys are signed long-term, through the next, bunch of seasons. So they're going to be there. I think they'll be in the mix. And, you even look at guys like Lafreniere. I think eventually they'll do a long-term contract with him. And we saw him really come into his own this past season. They've got some young, exciting players that seem like they're ready. Guys like Brennan Hoffman, maybe Brett Berard as well. Will Cooley, I think, might have a bigger role this season after an impressive rookie season. So, yeah, I feel like the window should be open for them to win a cup in at least the next 2 seasons. And after that, we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get there. When Panarin, when his contract comes up, I wouldn't be surprised to see him leave, but they've got 2 more seasons of him, and a phenomenal season for him this past year. So, yeah, man, I think at least 2 more cracks is definitely about right.
Fantastic. John, we're going to head to another quick break here on our little crossover, and then we're going to finish off. I want to ask you then what you feel the Red Wings may need, yes, and whatever questions you may have for us, and then we'll finish off talking a little bit of Lafreniere versus Lucas Raymond, because we all know people love to revisit the 2020 draft because, well, let's face it, the Red Wings got screwed, and so we're vindictive about it. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, crossover episode between Locked On Red Wings and Locked On New York Rangers. Scotty, I believe you're up next. You haven't asked a question in a minute. Me, I ramble, so go ahead, buddy.
It's all right, man. I do want to get into the comparison of maybe comparison's not the right word, but just the status of where both of these teams are at. Obviously, Brian had asked you about expectations before. I actually want to kind of zoom out and take a look back a few years, and when the Rangers won the lottery and got Lafreniere, the future of the Rangers looked incredibly bright, and it was oh, look at this, you can kind of see the young core forming. They just got this believed to be can't miss prospect at the top of the draft, etc. And then even despite, and like you said, he came into his own last year. I promise I'm not trying to throw shade on him, but he got up to a slower start, right? And yet the Rangers continued to grow around him and continued to be, reach that, potential that a lot of people thought. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with Igor as well. Just I want you to really kind of, I don't know if explain is the right word, but just kind of point out what the biggest, I guess, pillars of the Rangers have been for the last 3 or 4 years. And the reason why, despite maybe a slower start from Lafreniere, they still were able to become this team that's going to be a perennial cup contender for the foreseeable future. They're still young. They still have, like you said, a lot of their core is even still RFAs. So really exciting times, I think, in Rangers land. It's just what got them here. And then also in your eyes, what do you still need to get over the hump as well?
Yeah, it's funny. People will, again, the dramatic Ranger fans will try to make it sound like, oh, they missed their window and this and that. They've got one forward who's older than 32.
Right.
This is not an old team in the slightest. It might feel that way because they've all been here a while, but it's still a relatively young team. But as far as answering your question, any, topic like this, it has to begin with Igor Shesterkin, because I think, Gerard Gallant's first year when the Rangers unexpectedly made the playoffs, unexpectedly made it to the Eastern Conference Final, Igor could cover up a lot of the Ranger deficiencies and did that a lot that year. There were games that the Rangers won where, he should have been the first, second, and third star. There were games where he would go out there and just do ridiculous things and be basically the only reason why they would win the game. And then, they start winning, and I think, you start getting that winning feeling and your confidence grows a little bit, and hey, we've got our backbone back there. He's got our back, and that's when you start to see players come into their own. But yeah, they've just done a lot of good things over the years. Between the previous GM, Jeff Gorton, the current GM, Chris Drury, there's been more hits than misses when it comes to trades that they've done, free agent signings, drafts. I think all those things have really kind of added up. You sign Artemi Panarin in free agency, and he becomes, a pillar of this Ranger team. And, you have your homegrown players that have had, varying degrees of success, but Alexis Lafreniere coming into his own, the defensemen, a lot of the defensemen are homegrown. Braden Schneider and Keandre Miller, that could be your second pairing going into this next year. And then, just good free agent signings again. Vincent Trocheck, that was a move that was made a few years ago. And I think, a couple of Ranger fans were saying, what's so special about this guy? But he's been completely irreplaceable. And him at, $5.6 million, whatever it is. I mean, he's a steal at that price at this point. So yeah, just a little bit of everything, and again, they haven't been perfect. There have been a couple whiffs. The Trouba trade doesn't really seem to be paying dividends the way they would have liked. But overall, they have put together a heck of a team. And I'd actually like to ask you guys as well, because, we've been talking about the Rangers and a couple of Rangers that are now Red Wings. And of course, the Trouba trade that never happened. But yeah, the Red Wings, I mean, clearly they've been building up, slowly but surely here and getting better and better with every year that's gone by here. I mean, playoffs have to be like a realistic expectation, a realistic goal coming into this season, right? Because they barely missed it this past year, and it does feel like you've got a lot of players coming into their own over there.
Yeah,
No?
you asked a very hot button conversation topic there for sure. I'll try to keep it brief, but it's. I think if you ask a majority of the fan base, they're with you, right? Like natural progression would say that they should have their eyes set on the playoffs this year. And I think the team's eyes should be set on the postseason. The difficult part with it is, when you look at what walked out of the room this year and what they brought in, I think Brian and I have talked about, and I think there's a few other people in the Red Wings media kind of circle that are looking around going, okay, different names, but I think the team's about where it was last season. The biggest thing the biggest factor this season is going to be an injection of youth, I think is the expectation. Obviously, you're going to get a full season out of Edvinsson, which is going to be a really big deal and hopefully bolster your second pair there. But there's a lot of young players that have been in the system for years now and are kind of knocking on the door. The Red Wings have one of the best farm systems in all of hockey. And so having that, it's basically, I don't want to say a guessing game, but it really comes down to how much faith you have in the youth that is going to be injected to produce at a high enough level to potentially be a playoff team in the NHL. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to be like, oh, like if they miss, it's okay, because I think you just put up a 91 point season. I think it's natural to, and Yzerman has improved every year of his tenure, has been better than the last. So I think it's natural and very okay for everybody to say, hey, playoffs is the expectation this year. But at the same time, I think kind of being around where they were this year is probably a little more realistic.
Yeah, and that's the really disappointing part in one sense, because of the fact that like we as Red Wings fans first want them to make that step forward into the playoffs, but this was a record low amount of points to clinch a wild card spot in NHL history, at least in this format. And now you're going to have to, it's probably going to go back up again. So now you need the Red Wings to take a step forward points wise. And as Scotty put it, like they're going to be leaning on youth to make up for a lot of the depth scoring that they lost. And that's not impossible, but a lot of times when you introduce more young players in a lineup, sometimes they go through ebbs and flows in their first season as they're getting, like Lucas Raymond, for example, had 57 points his rookie season with the Detroit Red Wings, but in the second half of that year, his scoring pace really slowed down as he adjusted to a full 82-game season. Like it's hard to ask for you, and the youth has to come here. So like we're in favor of the youth in the pipeline starting to making an impact on the roster, because that's how you build contenders, is through your own draft. And so we're in favor of it, but like we're also recognizing too that a lot of depth scoring walked out of the locker room this year, and that was by design. Like going into last year, the Red Wings had putrid scoring. So Yzerman signed a bunch of depth scorers to try and bolster the scoring. That worked, except that made them horrible defensively. And so this offseason is like, okay, that doesn't work. Going full Buffalo Sabres doesn't work to make you go to the playoffs. In fact, they didn't make the playoffs for a lot of the similar reasons the Buffalo Sabres missed the year prior, right? Glass cannon offense. It's either 5 goals or giving up 5 goals. It was no in between. And so he decided this year, he's like, okay, we got to make this team better defensively. So like they got better defensively for sure, but at the cost of letting goals walk out the door. And the question then becomes is, will that make you better? We're not sure. We think it's the right direction for the team to head, but I don't know if it's going to make the team better enough to make it into the playoffs this year, which is disappointing because we want them to make the playoffs. We want them desperately to make the playoffs.
Yeah,
Yeah. Unfortunately, progress isn't linear. Sometimes you take a small step back to take a step forward. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Red Wings this year actually step back to like 88 points rather than go forward to like 96, because you have a mix of a new type of roster, right? A more defensively minded roster, which would hypothetically fit Derek Lalonde's system. He wants to be a defensive minded coach. So you could see more than marginal improvements based on that, more, coalescence between the two, rather. But also, you need the youth to really help fill in the gaps. So it's a huge question mark, John. And between the two of us, that's a long, rambly answer just to say we don't know.
No, it's cool, man. Hey, look, it's fun being in that spot when you are getting better and you are improving. And to me, kind of just looking at them without going through the whole Eastern Conference, it kind of feels like they could be a little bit of a bubble team. But then, you look at some teams that made it last year, like, the Caps, are they going to get back in? Like, they're old, and I don't know. I could see the Red Wings certainly passing them, and that's all it takes. You just got to get in the top half and you're in. But, you touched upon wanting to be a better defensive team. And there's somebody that's a former Ranger that's on the Red Wings that is known as a good defensive forward, but probably not producing offensively the way you guys would like, and that's Andrew Kopp. So just your thoughts. You just want to
touch an exposed nerve? Is that what you're doing?
That's what I'm doing, man. Hey, man, I got to check in on my former Rangers. I love doing that. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, Kopp's had an interesting Red Wings tenure. Of the former Rangers that are on the team, I would say the Patrick Kane experience has been much more fan friendly than the Andrew Kopp experience. He's going to be on like PK1, we understand his value defensively and whatnot, but just hasn't even come honestly like remotely close to producing offensively what was kind of expected of him when they handed out a contract. What was that, 2 years ago now? So I don't know. His role on the team, like, he's going to be a bottom six center. He's going to be the third line center probably. In that role, I think he's going to be like fine. But at this point, it's not even like, oh, we're all really banking on a bounce back, or, oh, can he do it? It's just like, I think we all kind of know what he is, and that's not going to be a very high point total. And when the contract is up, he's certainly not going to get that amount of money again. I think pretty safe to say.
Right, and the really weird thing too about like Andrew Kopp is the year before, his first year at the Detroit Red Wings, he only scored 9 goals. He didn't even break double-digit goals coming off a season where he scored 20+, which was a career high for him. And obviously, we talked before you came on about how like he got a little bit of a Panarin bump when he got traded from Winnipeg, which he was already having a career year in Winnipeg, and then he got traded to a better Rangers team and put on a line with Panarin. Like, that's going to help a lot. Right. But he only has 9 goals, but he did set a career high in points his first year with the Red Wings. He had, not a career high in points, his second career high, the next one down in points, and the career high in assists with the Detroit Red Wings when he had 33 assists that year. So, like, his role, his performance changed from scoring goals to providing assists on the second line, because I know his career high was combined, 50-something points between the Rangers and the Jets the year before, and then he had 42 the first year with the Detroit Red Wings. Well, this year, he got bumped down again because the Red Wings signed JT Compher, and now he was just straight up PK shutdown line. And so his points suffered again, and he went down to 33.
They didn't even ask him to produce points. They literally made a line where they were like, you're the they called them the shutdown line. And they were like, you guys, it's Fischer, Kopp, and Rasmussen. You guys are just going to play defense and just don't allow goals while you're on the ice. They didn't even ask. They were like, Andrew Kopp, we don't even expect you to score anymore. Just like, don't allow goals. Like, that was literally the expectation that was even like by the end of the year, that was like by American Thanksgiving. They were like, yeah, that's just your role.
What about American Christmas?
Good job, Brian.
That's a callback, John. Sorry, that's an inside joke. It's tough, right? Like, he was good in that role. Like, he's good as a shutdown center. He's good as a penalty killer, but it's like the Trouba conversation to start with, where you're paying him $5.6 million. That's not good value. out of a guy you're paying 5.6. So
Right.
it's fine that that's his role, but you still need more points out of him to justify that salary, and that's just what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's funny how we always have to like think in terms of the salary cap because it is so tight, and it's like we never just like judge anybody by how they're playing. It's like, well, but he's making this much, or oh, he's only making that little. But we all have to do it because it's tough to fit your team under the salary cap.
It is fascinating the salary cap just kind of outlook of everything. I do want to. I know we got to get out of here. I do want to.
Yeah, we got to ask.
I know. I got to ask about Lafreniere. Just talk about, honestly, like I don't even need, if you want to like compare him to Raymond, go for it. I'm not going to stop you, but I don't even need that. I genuinely just want like slow start to the career. You've said multiple times now he really came into his own this season. Just kind of talk about his progression and why he had such a good season this year. Kind of what are the biggest reasons that jump out to you as to why this was coming into his own season?
Yeah, well, we talked about the Panarin bump a little while ago there, and I think everybody gets it. Anybody that plays with Artemi Panarin, you're very naturally going to see an uptick in points. There was a little bit of concern of him moving from his natural left wing to right wing, but they've always kind of had an imbalance ever since he was drafted because you got Kreider, Panarin, and Lafreniere on the left side. So to do your best top six, somebody has to change. They chose to make that Lafreniere this past season. And, I mean, he's a right winger now. Like, I don't even have to think twice about it. Like, he did great over there. I think, again, the Panarin bump certainly helps. But also, something that was noticeably better this year, I think certainly was his skating. It just felt like, he was just flying out there and, getting to places where he needs to be to score. And I think just the fact that he has Peter Laviolette as his head coach. And when the Rangers hired Laviolette, I wasn't so sure how he did with, younger players. But you go back and you look at all these different rosters that he had when he either won the Cup or made it to the Cup finals over the years. He had a lot of young players and a lot of guys that went on to great careers. Some of them are still having great careers. And I think he kind of worked his magic with Lafreniere a little bit. It felt like he had a little bit more rope, did Lafreniere. Like if he had a lackluster shift or two, they weren't going to like bump him down to the third or fourth line. He was going to, keep riding with him, and he did that. And man, I mean, the shot, I think came a long way. He's a nasty shooter as well. So yeah, I mean, the sky's really the limit at this point. And keep in mind, all those numbers that he had last year, all the points that he got, he did that while basically never playing on the top power play unit. And that might still be the case this upcoming season because they have the same 5 guys back for the top unit. But, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, again,
good problem to have.
Exactly. He's anytime they're down by a goal and they pull the goalie, he's always the extra guy. It's the top power play unit plus Lafreniere. So we'll see if they try him there this season. Maybe they need a shakeup at some point during the year. I mean, the Ranger power play has been very good. So it's kind of one of those if it ain't broke, don't fix it situations. But he's certainly capable of handling that at this point, I would say for sure.
Yeah, and I think part of that, it's a similar kind of thing with Lucas Raymond this last year, right? It's just it takes time for guys to develop. They're the same age, right? Obviously, Lafreniere has 1 extra year of NHL experience because he was the number 1 overall pick and immediately came into the league. But, Raymond went through a sophomore slump. After breaking onto the scene his rookie season, I think he finished 4th in Calder voting. That was the year Sider won the Calder. His points took a dip, and he looked kind of overwhelmed in his second season as a Detroit Red Wing. He worked in the offseason. He developed, he gained 8 to 10 pounds, depending on who you ask, in the offseason because he's 5'10", and then he gained confidence this season. Like there were times this season where with Larkin out, and he was asked to be the guy, and once he realized it's like, oh hey, because he wants to be primarily a playmaking guy historically, it's like once he realized, hey, if I shoot the puck, I can score. It was like all bets were off. So for a lot of these guys, like development is just a lot about getting your confidence underneath you, like realizing I deserve to be here. And we talked to Carter Mazur a couple of weeks ago, and he said the same thing about the AHL. Like he struggled in the first half of the season with Grand Rapids. Then like it dawned on him, it's like I deserve to be here, and that goes a long way. Yeah. So I love watching these top 4 picks, top 5 picks from that draft because most of them, minus Quentin Byfield, are in the Eastern Conference, so you get to see them a lot more closely and comparing and contrasting. And Lucas Raymond had a fantastic year. And he finished with 70-plus points.
Byfield was another guy that started off slow and then really came into his own. And like Stützle's really Raymond had a really solid first year too, but like Stützle was phenomenal off rip, right? And then like everybody else has kind of had, Raymond had a sophomore slump. Obviously, like I said, the first 2 picks kind of started off slow, but now have looked really good lately. It's really fascinating. That draft is going to be talked about for the next 15 years. So Yeah, well, I know we ran super long here, but it kind of wouldn't be a crossover between us without talking a little bit of
Right.
of Laffy and Razor.
It's almost as if it takes young players multiple years to fully come into their own, and we shouldn't write them off just because they struggle a little bit at the beginning.
Shocking.
Amen to that. And it's crazy. They're all still in their early 20s. And real quick, I know we've run long here, but Patrick Kane, I mean, like signing him last year, did you guys see that coming? Did you think he would stick around? Did you want him to stick around? We can do kind of a quick version of this if you want, because there were Ranger fans who wanted him back, and it didn't happen.
I think, honestly, off rip, we have both, eaten our words a little bit. The first time they signed him, both of us were rather hesitant, me even more so than Brian. Brian kind of came around there when it sounded like it was really going to happen. And I kind of dug my heels in, and I was like, I don't know how he's going to come back from this. And he did. And he was still Patrick Kane, and he obviously had a phenomenal season. And then Brian and I were of the mindset, we were like, he's not coming back. Like, he has a market now. Somebody's going to give him 2 years. The Red Wings are not going to be that team. And that was wrong too. And so I think I'm just gonna keep predicting like bad things. Like I'm gonna be like, Patrick Kane's gonna, score 5 goals this year, and then he'll win the Hart, and everything will be okay. Right. But like it's been a wild road. We were super in favor of the re-signing. I think that's a brilliant deal. Obviously, only on 1 year as well for the Wings, but it's been a really up and down kind of thing. But yeah, now he's a big piece, honestly, of what this offense in this top 6 hope to accomplish point production wise this season. And it's incredible they got him back, because if they didn't, there would have been a huge hole on second line wing if they weren't able to bring him back this season. So crisis averted, really.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with everything that Scotty just said. That being said, guys, let's wrap this up. As everyone's already stated, we've ran too long. John, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Give Locked On New York Rangers a listen. To our listeners, give Locked On New York Rangers a listen if you want some good Rangers content. One of the best Locked On NHL pods out there. So, John, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Thank you, guys. And any Ranger fans listening, definitely check out Locked On Detroit Red Wings. These guys are 2 of the best, no doubt about it. All right, so a big thanks to you guys for tuning in and checking out this special crossover edition. Big thanks to Brian and Scotty as well for teaming up for this special episode of Locked On Rangers and Locked On Red Wings. Couple other things real quick here before we go. The Shoulder Check Showcase, which is a charity game, will be happening in Stamford, Connecticut, and I will be attending on Thursday. Really looking forward to going to that. A lot of NHL players from all over the league, some PWHL players as well. And just going to be a really fun time, a really nice event. I went to it last year. Looking forward to getting back again this year. And then, of course, we'll talk about it in the episode that follows Thursday night's charity game. And, of course, also just wanted to mention that the Fantasy League is still open. So get back in touch with me if you want to get back in from last season. And also a quick announcement here. I have decided that next week I'm going to be taking a week off from Locked On New York Rangers. No big reason, just kind of getting a breather here. And this is probably the best part of the NHL calendar to do that. I certainly wouldn't want to do it in season. Definitely wouldn't want to do it during the playoffs or anything like that. So, yeah, going to be off next week, just getting a little breather. And then we will be back to doing what we do here on Locked On New York Rangers. So definitely looking forward to that as well. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.